The ideas expressed in the Akron Roundtable Signature Series are those of the speakers, not of the Akron Roundtable, its partners, or sponsors.
It is our true privilege to welcome today's speaker, Maribel Perez Wadsworth, President and CEO, John S. and John L. Knight Foundation. Moderating today's conversation with Maribel is David Giffords, who is an author and professor and coordinator of the Northeast Ohio Master of Fine Arts program at the University of Akron. Our speaker has agreed to take questions from the audience following today's conversation. And John Garfalo, Vice President, Community Investment, Akron Community Foundation, and a member of the Akron Roundtable Board, will moderate the Q&A. To submit a question, please refer to the brochures at your table or scan the QR code that will be projected on the screens. Feel free to submit your questions at any time during today's presentation. Our Asker technology is made possible by a gift from the Akron Chamber. If you would like to submit a question but are without access to a mobile device, there are note cards on your table. Feel free to jot your question on that, and a member of our staff will come by and collect those questions from you. You can read more about this month's speakers, future Akron Roundtable events, and individuals and organizations who support our mission by referring to the brochures at your table. Today's signature event is the first of our four-part series, Celebrate Akron, in recognition of Akron's bicentennial. The Billows Funeral Home and Crematory and Huntington Bank are the Celebrate Akron's co-sponsors. I would now like to invite Kyle Kudichief, Akron Program Director for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, to introduce today's speaker. The Knight Foundation is also today's program sponsor. Thanks, Kyle.
Well, good afternoon. It is great to be with you here at Akron Roundtable, a place that brings people together to share ideas, ask questions, and talk about what's next for our community. As some of you may know, John S. Knight personally helped establish the Akron Roundtable in 1976. Thank you to the Roundtable team and board for continuing this essential forum. This year marks 75 years since Knight Foundation was founded here in Akron. While our work today reaches across the country, this city has always been at the heart of our mission. As Mr. Knight said, "I don't care who runs Akron, just so somebody runs it. It is too important to be left alone." It is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Maribel Perez Wadsworth, Knight Foundation's President and CEO. Like our founders, Maribel is deeply rooted in journalism. She spent nearly 30 years in the field and served as president of Gannett Media and publisher of USA Today, where she led one of the largest news networks in the country. Over the past year, she's visited Knight cities, listening and learning from people working every day to build stronger, more connected communities. And today, she's back with us in Akron, and she'll be sharing some of what she's seen and what it means for our city and cities like ours. And it's fitting that she's going to be interviewed by a former journalist from the Akron Beacon Journal and professor at the University of Akron. Please join me in welcoming Maribel Perez Wadsworth.
Thank you, Kyle, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to be back in Akron, truly the original Knight City. This is where Charles Knight bought the Akron Beacon Journal in 1903. And it's where his sons, Jack and Jim, built what was really one of the largest and truly great newspaper companies in America. And yes, as Kyle said, it's also where 75 years ago this December, the Knight Foundation came to be. So from the very beginning, Akron, its triumphs, its opportunities, its fortunes and woes are deeply central to Knight's own story. And we're so proud to support you who are making this city such a vibrant and forward-thinking place. I want to thank the Akron Roundtable, which of course Jack Knight helped to begin 50 years ago, for inviting me here to speak. And I want to thank all of you here for joining us today. I also want to take a moment and acknowledge a few special guests. Mayor Shamus Malik and his wife Alice, thank you so much for being here. We also have our Knight trustee, Christine Mayer, who is here. Thank you so much for joining. And former trustees, Bill Considine and Jim Crutchfield. I really appreciate your partnership and guidance. You all know Kyle, and we could not do our work but for his deep love and care for this community. So I'm deeply appreciative to have him as a partner in this work. Also here, Cynthia Knight, who of course needs no introduction in this community, but thank you so much for carrying on the proud legacy of Landon and his family, and thank you so much for the warm welcome you've given me in my first year at Knight Foundation. And lastly, because you know the world's a small place and you never know who you're going to be connected to and how we're going to be those 6 degrees of separation. But my dear friend, who also needs no introduction in Northeast Ohio, Bernie Kosar, is here with us today. Thank you, Bernie, for joining us. So I became president of Knight Foundation at the start of last year. And it's been a whirlwind, but this is my second time in Akron, and I'm so pleased to be here. I have spent these first 15, 16 months, as Kyle noted, visiting our cities, really immersing in these wonderful places that are Knight cities, and getting to meet all of you, meeting our partners, and meeting the people who are reinventing and truly invigorating the towns that they deeply care about. It's given me great hope and helped to affirm my natural-born optimism in our country's future. On a national level, we spent a lot of time talking about division and disconnection. Our politics can feel super broken. The problems feel impossible to solve. But in city after city, I've seen how local leaders, just like all of you in this room today, your neighbors and your friends are coming together to find solutions, to rebuild trust, and to strengthen connection. So I see so clearly here, over and over again, despite our differences, trust remains. In our local communities, we know how to find common cause and make common ground, and we get things done. In fact, what I've seen in all these difficult times, so much division, and yet the power to create change is not lost. It's local. It's right here in front of us. I traveled in all these visits. I went to Macon, Georgia, and I saw how Newtown Macon has pioneered new approaches to revitalizing their historic downtown. And they're transforming not just buildings, but the community's sense of possibility. In Philadelphia, I learned about a program called Every Voice, Every Vote that brought together a coalition of 130 media outlets, community nonprofits, civic-minded social media creators, and they helped to produce unprecedented election coverage that truly helped local citizens make informed choices for themselves and their city's future. In Detroit, I got to visit the Detroit People's Food Co-op, a new community-owned supermarket that has completely transformed healthy food options for local residents in what had been a food desert. In these communities, people are working together and they're getting things done. And that's what I see here in Akron too, thanks to the ambition and hard work and commitment of so many community leaders. Our downtown here is becoming a neighborhood again. I just got to visit Lock 3 Park. I had been there last March. I had to wear a hard hat, It was mostly a mud pit at the time. And so to see in just a few months fast forward, its true transformation and an anchor point in this community is so special. Even just this morning, seeing families down at the park enjoying this incredible public space, it just shows what's possible when we work together. At the Akron Civic Center, Civic Theater just next door, under the visionary leadership of Howard Parr, and I think I saw you, Howard. It's refurbished the 1929 home and expanded into the adjacent Whitelaw building that had been vacant for decades and now has new life as a new performance space. And of course, the University of Akron's Polsky building, where President Niemer, I see you, President Niemer, yes, and his team are soon working to overhaul this iconic building and reorient it to make it so much more accessible and open to the community. And it's local leaders with vision and dedication that are driving positive change, not just in downtown, but throughout Summit County. At the Akron Art Museum, under the leadership of John Fiume, they're exploring new technology and how it can enhance the presentation and experience and exhibition of modern and contemporary art. The same visionaries behind the reinvention of Block 3 also broke ground on the new Summit Lake Park. And I got to see the heavy machines on the ground there yesterday. Really exciting. I'm sure by the time I come next time, I will be able to enjoy that. One thing that struck me when I visited last time was getting to meet with local residents who are truly co-creating this experience, this new park for their community. And that's really what it's all about, is that focus on co-creation. And of course, Zach Cole and his team at the Well Community Development Corporation continue to revitalize the Middlebury community, restoring housing and supporting residents and advancing entrepreneurship through the Akron Food Works. And I'm really excited to see what more he and the team will do there. These are just a few examples of the amazing things happening just here in Akron, of people here on the ground who love this place, who are working together to make their community better. And Knight's deep belief in this city and the people is reflected in the more than $110 million that Knight has invested in Akron over the last decade. Public spaces, arts and culture, neighborhood revitalization, these are all key priorities for Knight Foundation. They're building blocks of thriving communities. So, of course, is local journalism, where I spent most of my career. Signal Akron is a new nonprofit news source that launched here at the end of 2023. And as you know, it is both locally focused and community-oriented, and its staff represents the audience it serves. It's yet another example of people coming together and making a difference. We were a founding supporter of Signal, which represents a real core belief, and one that traces back to Jack and Jim Knight, that a thriving community requires a healthy and vibrant local information ecosystem. Just over a year ago, the Knight Foundation partnered with MacArthur Foundation and hundreds of other funders across the country to launch Press Forward, a $500 million initiative to build sustainable models for local news. And it's an effort that's very much informed by the values that Jack and Jim Knight brought to their newspapers. That reliable local news is crucial to successful local government, that reliable local news and that every community is unique and deserves its own unique coverage and can best identify local solutions to local problems. It's an idea that ideas really truly bloom locally, and that is where we find our best solutions that can hopefully ultimately scale nationally. And while Press Forward is national in scope, it's designed to bring local funders to the table also, because ultimately it's people deeply invested in their community's well-being that understand that reliable, trusted local journalism is vital to strong communities. So Signal Akron is supported by Knight and also by a coalition of local funders, including the Akron Community Foundation and GAR Foundation, Goodyear, the Greater Akron Chamber, Huntington Bank, United Way of Summit and Medina, the University of Akron Foundation, and the Weldy Building Construction. They have found common cause and are working together to get things done for their community. It is that kind of commitment and collaboration that's so wonderful about Akron and its people. This is a no-nonsense, hardworking, shoulder to the grindstone place, and every one of us gathered here today knows this city gets things done and doesn't take no for an answer. What I've seen is that there are so many leaders in so many places across the country that, just like you, stand ready to tackle today's challenges. People who care about their neighbors, people with audacious ideas and passion and grit, who are ensuring that their communities not only survive but also thrive. People who know the power rests with them, that are coming together just as you are. These engaged, committed citizens are the key to making our communities and ultimately our country stronger. And their work, your work, our work together reminds us of something essential, that democracy isn't just a system of government. It is the daily practice of civic life. It happens when neighbors meet for a concert or a coffee in a new public park. It happens when residents are inspired by seeing a performance or visiting a museum. It happens when citizens speak up at a city council meeting, or when leaders gather together on community issues through organizations like the Akron Roundtable. In all of these places, this is where democracy happens. Jack and Jim Knight believe their newspapers had a crucial role to play in their communities, and each of their papers was proudly a product of its place. And they were firmly committed to the role of the press in democratic self-government, ensuring that citizens have information they need to pursue their own true interests. For 75 years, the Knight Foundation has lived up to those ideals by elevating our communities and enhancing our democracy. We've adapted to changing times, but our guiding vision remains constant. Today in Akron and in all Knight cities, we're helping to elevate and invest in breakthroughs that spark larger movements across the nation. We're helping to supercharge the knowledge and capability of visionary leaders, and we know that communities are strongest when we value and empower everyone to take part. Looking out at this group today, I'm reminded that our local connections matter now more than ever. We Americans still trust our neighbors. We still believe in our libraries. We still care about our local downtowns. And we still work together to keep our communities strong. We Americans still believe in getting together in our communities and talking things out and solving our problems, exactly as you do here. As the leader of the foundation that carries their legacy, it's a thrill for me to be here in Jack and Jim Knight's hometown. And I'm confident that they would be every bit as thrilled to see how vibrant and bustling downtown Akron is today. We're proud to be part of Akron, and that Akron is part of us. We're proud to be community partners in making downtown a neighborhood again. And we're driven by the energy of the people all across America, like you, who are using their power, the people's power, every day to make their communities and our democracy stronger. Akron is better because of what you do, and so is our country. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Akron, Maribel.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
As the home of LeBron James, we're always pleased when somebody comes from Miami to Akron. So great to have you back here, and glad that you got to see Block 3 on a beautiful day and enjoy what we know is already a great city. So I want to start, you already invoked the Akron Beacon Journal as ground zero for the Knight Foundation. And yet the Akron Beacon Journal is a much different institution in a 21st century media landscape. And so I wonder if you can reflect on the role of legacy newspapers at large, and specifically the Beacon Journal, in the power to create change.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a crucial centering community asset is how I think about it. Maybe need to get this closer. You know, the Beacon Journal has been around a long time. And it is a place that is still today provides important, reliable, trusted content. The media landscape has changed significantly. I think it's actually wonderful that there are so many media outlets in Akron. Whether it's Signal we were just talking about, or television, or public media, et cetera, it is so important. If one news source is vital, many news sources is actually a wonderful thing, because it helps to give a community a fuller picture of itself. I think especially because of all of the disruption that's happening in the business model for especially local newspapers, the idea that they can still today be the place that covers all the things is not really right. So collaboration across that and other news sources that can fill in some of those gaps is crucial to the community.
So with that said, the Knight Foundation also funds Signal Akron. How do they fit together? Where should they, what are their lanes to your view?
Well, obviously it's up to them to decide their lanes. My sincere hope is, one of the things I met with the Signal team when I was here in March of last year, and I was, really delighted at the way they were thinking about their particular role and the spaces to fill. And one of the conversations we had, for example, was we have a vibrant arts and culture scene here, and the Beacon Journal had, not been able to do as much of that coverage of late. And so Signal saw a gap and an opportunity in the market to really meet those information needs. It's important not just to have arts and culture, but to be connected and to hear about what's coming and what what new offerings exist, and to be connected in that way and to see that reflected in your local news, I think is really important. So I loved seeing them see an opportunity and an information gap and something that was important to the community, and then to see the audience respond to that. Yeah. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Just occurred, we both come from print journalism backgrounds.
Yeah.
Do you get home delivery of your local newspaper?
I do not get home delivery of my local newspaper anymore. I am subscribed to, I have lost count how many news sources digitally. And I'll tell you, I don't get a local newspaper delivered anymore, not because I don't actually still enjoy that experience, but because I travel so much, it actually doesn't make sense. And so I have it at my fingertips all the time.
Yeah, do you start your morning with the news?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, I start usually my overnight with the news, which I think is probably a habit for a lot of people. And you wake up at 2 in the morning, have to go straight for the news. I know the mayor's nodding. He's like, I'm sure.
Some former colleagues are here. I get home delivery, and it's always on time. It's a great product.
Show of hands. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Probably not a good idea.
Don't do that.
You recently wrote an op-ed about the talk of defunding public media,
yeah.
NPR and PBS.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could reflect not only on what the danger would be if that were to occur, but also what role philanthropy should play in funding those news sources.
Yeah. I did publish an op-ed just a few weeks ago when the executive order first came out seeking to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR and PBS. And look, it's important to be informed by facts and context. At the end of the day, those dollars, while not small dollars, are de minimis in the big scheme of things. It amounts to about $1.60 per American per year. That's what our taxpayer dollars are the sum total of the taxpayer dollars funding public media. The return on that investment is tremendous. For every dollar of public funding, public television and radio stations can then turn that into $8 more in private and philanthropic funding. It's a tremendous return on investment. But setting aside the hard dollars return on investment, when you look across the country, in many communities, not Akron, but in many, many communities, the only available source of news and information about that community is a public radio station or television station. And if that doesn't seem important on your typical day, then think about it in the midst of a weather emergency, a natural disaster. It is also the emergency broadcast system for the nation. It is absolutely a life and death matter to have access to this information source. And so that is why I think it's so crucially important. Not only do we need day-to-day to have access to information that's happening about things happening in our community, what our government's doing, et cetera, but it's also, in many, many places, the only place to get basic information in emergency situations.
I was talking with Mike McIntyre from IdeaStream before the program began, and he was talking about the concept, the very important concept that it's more important to raise trust than to raise money. Mm-hmm. And although money is important to PBS and NPR. So, but in your op-ed, you reflected on some statistics, some polling about the level of trust in public media, and if you could talk about the numbers and also why that trust is important again in a landscape that includes so much social media and distrust of media in general.
Yeah, it's true. There's no question. I mean, trust in every institution has eroded in the last many years, and it's no different in media, certainly. But again, it goes back to my earlier point. We keep talking about everything with these broad strokes and in a very nationalized sort of way. And when you get down to the local level, I mean, and it happens across anything. You know, people have all kinds of things to say about mistrust of education and whether it's higher ed or the local school boards or what have you. But guess what? People still love their kid's teacher, right? And people still love their local newspaper and trust it. And the statistics bear that out when Knight funds a lot of research in this space and in trust in media. In the case of public media, for example, by a 2-to-1 margin, people trust it versus distrust it. That's significant, right? That's not what you hear, right, when you're talking in these broad strokes and people are just saying you can't trust the media. But when you ask people, what they tell you is they trust it much more than they distrust it. That's important. By the way, that same is true when you're talking about national media versus local media. People trust their local news sources so much more than they trust the national media. And so I like to bank where momentum is. I like to invest where the strength already is. And so I think all of us would do well to break out of this very nationalized conversation and focus on what's right in front of us, which is we actually still trust our institutions locally. We have 400 people here who probably generally like and trust each other and are willing to work together. So can we break out of that, what is noisy and is creating a distorted sense of reality?
Yeah. As you've gained sort of a deeper understanding of the Knight cities, I think one of the dynamics of Akron is that it's of a size that one person, one institution can make a difference. And I mean, I think everybody here will agree that there's half a degree of separation between everybody in Akron. Probably everyone ran into somebody they know today. How does that size of a city, like when you think of Akron's size, what are its opportunities in terms of one person or one startup institution or one legacy institution to make a difference that's maybe different from a larger metropolis?
I don't know if this is the hardwired optimist in me or what, but I actually think one person can make a difference everywhere. no matter the size city. And I see this, right? I mean, I've been in Detroit a couple of times in the last year, and I'll walk the Joe Louis Greenway with the director, and she's put that on her back, and she's gonna go do it. You see that here, but I think it takes one person to take the first step. And then hopefully to take the hand of the next person, right? And then ultimately you're building a coalition. And as you hear me talk about some of the examples that I was citing earlier, it was the one person who had the idea, the spark, the audacity to think that something was possible. And then it took maybe 2 or 3 others to say, oh, well, I'll go in on that with you, or I'll support that. And then maybe, some funding and what have you. And the next thing you know, you have a miracle. But it just took the one person to take the first step. And I think that's true no matter what kind of city you have.
Yeah, and in more recent years, it seems like Knight has been committed to finding that one person and giving them a little bit of money, then giving a great big pile of money to one, one institution or one recognizable entity. How does that grassroots dynamic factor into your thinking as the leader?
I think it's both. I love those stories. I've been studying a lot of those efforts. We gave the seed grant. There was the idea that surfaced, and an interesting, smart person, and like, okay, we'll make that $25,000 bet or $50,000 bet, and the next thing you know, that spark actually did something, and now we're back with a $250,000 investment, and we're helping to scale. So I love to see that progression. To the point that, yeah, we do actually do the really big grants too, right? Yeah. And usually it's over time, but I love that sense of Knight as sort of the, igniter or the catalyst, if you will, a little bit of seed funding. But we also make big bets on big institutions too, right? A lot of our university partners, and obviously University of Akron, we've made significant investments, and they're not, I just said bets, and I think that's common language, but I don't see them as bets, because again, we're not the ones doing any of these things, right? All we're doing is recognizing the incredible ideas and innovations and, passion and commitment that everybody else has, and just putting hopefully a little bit of wind in the sails of that.
Well, to that end, and on the other side of that formula, one of the biggest donations Knight has, or pledges that Knight has made in Akron is the 2022 $20 million investment in the Polsky building.
Yeah.
That pledge has changed, the project has changed, so I wonder if you could talk about how it's changed, where it is now, and how you see that project as important to Akron.
I think it's always important that we remain really flexible, right, in our support of our partners. And when President Niemer took on the role at U of A, he rightly, as I did when I came into my role, took a step back to study, all of the different initiatives that were on deck. And, he called me and said, I'm studying this, and I actually think that we can accomplish all that we hope to, but we could probably do it in some ways that might, create more efficiencies, that might make more sense for the university. Well, I'm all ears on those conversations, because that's smart, that's right, that's what it should be. And so he's worked to reshape the project some, and the projects have come down, but proportionately we're still in and very deeply committed for a little more than half of that project, and excited for that, because seeing that building really be a connector into the downtown, and to have University of Akron, not just students, but also faculty and staff, and have access to Main Street, I think that's really powerful for downtown. And I'm thrilled that President Niemer continues to see that as important to the university, and we're thrilled to partner with him on that.
And what is the adjusted dollar amount of the pledge?
You're right here, President Niemer. You're good? You're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Go ahead, 15 point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's 15.5 million is what it is, and basically still a little more than half of the total project cost. Yes.
So this is your second visit to Akron.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, first of all, just sort of as a visitor, what has jumped out to you that looks like excitement or that looks special? And then from your role as the head of the foundation, what opportunities do you see that maybe we aren't recognizing?
That's a great question. Look, there's a lot of at play. I mean, I rattled through a lot of these. I'm truly, genuinely excited to get back and see the progression of Summit Lake Park. One of the things that I personally deeply enjoy doing as I make my way through cities is, it's all well and good to spend time with, everybody who's in sort of a leadership position, but it's especially important to me to spend time actually in community. So to be at the park and to be listening to what the people of that community thought was important to them in terms of what that park would actually be and offer, and then to see the people leading that effort listen and move forward with plans that actually will meet that hope and ambition, that's special. That's where the magic really happens in community. And so that was really important. And every single one of our cities where I see that happening, I want us to be running alongside those efforts. And so I'm excited to see what comes of that. I'm excited to come actually enjoy the events at Lock 3 Park. And when I come into our cities, I don't want to just be in a meeting room or what have you. It's important to me to actually be part of the community.
Well, we'll have a good Led Zeppelin cover band for you next time you come, so make sure of that.
Great.
I saw a quote where you described the Knight Foundation as moving at the speed of news. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could define what you think of as the speed of news and maybe give an example of how that operates.
Sure. I'll tell you, I'm not from philanthropy, right? This was all new to me. It's a very different animal than working in a daily media environment. And so coming into this work, I would tell you very sincerely that my first sort of description was slow. Everything is slow. Everything is a process. And, I see a lot of heads nodding. Yeah, I see on the other side of this situation. And I thought, surely we can work more quickly. There are a lot of things to solve in this world, and they do not need us dragging our feet. And so how can we turn ourselves to be more attentive, and responsive and agile, frankly, to meet the moment. I think it just is born out of a place, people joke there's no sort of natural predators, to philanthropy, and so you get a little sluggish. And I just don't think we should be that way. I think we absolutely need to be, sitting up straight and figuring out how to be helpful. We had, just in this last year, a number of situations that arose. One I'll mention is in the state of Florida, the governor unexpectedly zeroed out all arts funding from the state. As he was signing the budget bill. He used his line item veto and he zeroed out arts funding. Well, I don't need to tell any of you, whether you're in the arts field or just run a business, when you have an expectation that your revenues are going to be a certain amount and all of a sudden you see a 20, 30% shortfall, that's not easy to recover from. And so if we'd done things the way, sort of typical course, in following our processes, we might have created an initiative, and that initiative would have been a few $1 million, and that initiative would have had to get us to our next board meeting, which was 3 months away. And you can imagine that a lot of bad things are going to happen in that process, in that timeline. So instead, we said, well, what's the easiest way and the quickest way that we can, identify who's most hurt by this veto, how much money that is, how much of it is sitting in Knight cities in Florida, and we wrote 96 grants in 2 weeks and got the money out the door. And it's possible. It's possible.
So that's the practical response. Philosophically, what would you say to a political leader who says we don't need to be paying money for, art? That's what's important about the arts that requires this
Look,
response.
have a practical conversation. The arts are an economic driver. They build community and they connect us and they do all those things that I think we can generally agree are true about art. It's an economic driver. I've seen stats recently, just here in Summit County in the greater Akron area, the arts contribute $3 billion to the economy. You don't want to hurt that. In fact, you should be thinking about ways to put more wind in the sails of arts and culture because it is a true economic driver. I love good return on investment. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, whatever small amount we're contributing to the arts, it's coming back multifold into creating jobs, and not just in the arts, but all of the tangential businesses, right, that benefit from having thriving arts and culture in a place. So if you don't want to have the sort of softer feels conversation about how good it is to have, you know, culture and connection and all those things, fine. Don't have it that way. Talk about the dollars and cents. It makes good sense. There's great return on investment. So just have a conversation about dollars. And then the answer to me is obvious then.
Great, thank you. So I'll ask one more question, and then I know we want to leave time for questions from the audience. There's a quote I keep on the wall of my office at the university that writers of fiction and nonfiction should be writing about cities as characters. And it's the author Tom Wolfe. He says, because cities are, quote, feverish with moral tone. and I'm always thinking about, like, what's the moral tone of the city that I've written so much about, which is Akron. But if I put that concept to you, what do you see as the moral tone of the night cities that you have come to understand? Like, if you could put a characterization to what the moral tone of the modern American city is.
Mm-hmm. You know, I guess I'll rely on you know, what it really feels like is the through line across all of our cities. You know, the words I use today about Akron, I really believe, and I've come to see it in all of you. You know, there's a real grit, there's a real no nonsense. But I'm seeing that over and over again, whether I'm in Macon, whether I'm in Detroit or Philadelphia or Charlotte. I was just in Long Beach, of all places, and we're just gonna get things done. We love this place, we care about this place, we care about each other, and we don't only care about our own little tribe in this place, we care about the broader community, and we're gonna figure things out and get things done. And to me, that's what's gonna get us over all of the rest of this nonsense we contend with on a broader national scale, is just all of us locked arms in local communities saying, we've had it with that, we've got work to do, let's get about it.
Yeah, thank you, well said.
David, thank you so much for moderating, and Maribel, thank you so much for your insightful comments. And on behalf of our entire community, I think I could speak on behalf of the community. Thank you to you, to Kyle, to current trustees, Christine and Ramona, as well as former trustees, Bill and Jim, for your investments in this community. It's truly appreciated. So I have a long list of questions, way too many to ask in this time frame that we have, but you spent over 2 decades at Gannett and led USA Today and the USA Today network through major transitions. What were the biggest lessons you learned while navigating digital transformation in legacy media?
Even when you love a thing, it's really hard to make it work. And, you know, no surprise, the legacy media space has required a lot of hard decisions about how to consolidate, how to drive digital transformation. At the end of the day, at the heart of it, it all comes back to local. Are you truly being authentic to a place, to go back to the Jack and Jim Knight belief about their own newspapers? Are you being authentic? Are you truly putting the resources in a local community, driven by local people to help be part of the solution and the sense of place and the sense of connection in a community. And so what I have learned and what I believe and what I'm now trying to bring to Knight Foundation is a sense of getting back to those local roots and back to that local sense of ownership in your local news sources as truly central to communities' well-being.
That's great, thank you. We always have students from the area here at the Roundtable on a regular basis. As a Latina in media leadership, what challenges did you face on your path, and what advice would you give a young journalist or someone from an unrepresented background?
We don't have enough time for that whole story. But I would say first, I can't tell you how much it thrills me to know that there are students in the room and those who are considering a career in journalism and the media. I can tell you it is one of the most rewarding things to see the tangible effect, the tangible positive difference that your work can make in your communities. The number one thing I would say to people, and I say this all the time now when I meet with college students, is, you know, when I was in your shoes, I thought my aspiration was to go work at the New York Times or what have you. And, you know, please, please, please use your good skills and your passion and get back to your hometowns and work in journalism in your hometown. I don't think there's any greater contribution that you can make if journalism is your calling than to go back into the place that you deeply know and deeply care about and do that good work there.
Great. Thank you. Someone in the audience had an interesting question. As they watch stations like MSNBC and Fox News, they deliver the same news, but the delivery is completely opposite. Why is that?
Do we drink at the round table? We might need
This is
to.
vodka.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so much to say about that. Look, so much of what sadly we see, particularly in the cable news environment, isn't journalism. I know that's shocking, right? But it's not. It's not journalism. It's entertainment. It's pundits filling screen time. The advent of the 24/7 news channel. You got to fill the time. Most of those people are not journalists. It may all look the same, right? You've got an anchor desk and you've got people, talking about news topics, but they're not necessarily doing that in a strictly dispassionate, objective, fact-based way. And look, the idea that you have on some of those sets, you say, oh, we're super inclusive. We're going to bring the people on the left and the people on the right, and now they're all going to shout at each other. In these conversations. It doesn't matter whether it's Fox or MSNBC or any place in between. That's not helpful. That's not helpful to anything. I'm not sure we walk away more informed. We probably walk away a little angry, right? We probably walk away feeling frustrated. Maybe we feel confused because we turn on the one channel. My husband always goes to all the channels because he wants to understand how people are talking about things, right? Most people don't do that, right? You get trained on the one. You watch Fox, you watch MSNBC, and that's what you do. And I say, please just maybe step away from all of that and spend more time with, actual journalism. And actual journalism, newspapers have, since the beginning of their history, they've had opinion sections clearly labeled as such. They are opinion journalism, and there's an important role in that. But your news coverage needs to be the truth wherever it shall lead you. Let's follow the facts. Let's make sure the sourcing is solid. Let's be transparent about how we do our work. Let's explain the steps we took to get at the information and who we spoke to. Let's correct our errors when we make them. It's inevitable that we make them, but let's correct them. And I think that when you see that in your news sources, by the way, even when they do make mistakes, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Those are high ethical standards. So be discerning and demand more for yourself, and maybe turn off the cable news.
Smart advice. Maribel, you mentioned the cuts in public media, but we've also heard about the cuts from the National Endowment for the Arts as well as others. What can we and Knight do to strengthen the arts and humanities across our community and throughout the country?
Yeah, look, we're certainly not going anywhere. We're going to continue to focus on these things that we think are so important to community building and to strong communities, and certainly the arts. It breaks my heart to see the federal government stepping away from what I think are, in the big scheme of things, not necessarily major investments in terms of the federal budget, but incredibly meaningful to the small institutions that they support, and as I said, provide great return on that investment back to communities. And so we're going to continue to do all that we can. But I know everyone in this room is smart enough to understand that there is no way that all of philanthropy together with all pooled resources can possibly fill the gap that's created when the federal government walks away. And so that's something we all have to be, really clear-eyed about. But we're certainly not going anywhere.
So how can local media take greater responsibility for shifting from deficit-based narratives to one that uplift the people and organizations enriching our communities?
Yeah, look, I think that's an excellent question. And one of the things that is a source of some of the challenge, I think, from a trust perspective, as news organizations, local level, local newspapers, others have experienced such dramatic business model challenge, resource constraints. A natural byproduct of that is that they have fewer resources and have to pick and choose what they're focused on. And, I've been in this business a long time. You ask 100 journalists where they add the most unique value and what they can do that others can't, and probably 100 will say watchdog journalism, accountability journalism. And by the way, that is super important. That is part of the role. There's a reason that, freedom of the press is enshrined in the Constitution. But that's not your whole community, right? The local news is, in some ways, a center of gravity. It's how we see our whole community reflected when we're doing it right, which means you're also covering the things we should be celebrating and the amazing people doing important things, interesting things. It is about arts and culture. It is about high school sports. It's about all of the things that make a full community a full community. And if the only thing you're prioritizing is watchdog coverage, it is important. You should do that. But the community is going to see that the only thing you seem to care about is all the stuff that's not working. And that doesn't feel authentic because we all experience the full community, right? And we know there's good things, and we want to feel pride in our community, and we hope that our local news source is seeing and reflecting the full community. So I would really challenge our local newsrooms to step back and to really think about that and to be really attuned with the audience. And by the way, you're part of this community. You live in it. You experience it, right? You go to church. You have kids in school. You're doing all of these things. Let's make sure that your coverage is reflective of that.
Great. These last three questions will finish off our Q&A session, and they're more personal in nature. Looking back over your career, is there a pivotal moment that shaped your leadership style or perspective?
Yeah, I guess a lot of different ones. I feel very blessed. I'm, and some people know this, not everybody, I'm a daughter of refugees. I'm a first-generation American, and I sometimes can't really believe the place that I sit now and the things that I get to do and the work I'm blessed to do. And so I've always had very present the fact that throughout my life and throughout my career, there have been people who have either extended their hand to show me through a door or to help me see what was possible that I didn't see, or frankly, sometimes who showed me what not to do and not to be in terms of how I wanted to show up in the world for others. And I think it's always important to be grateful for both of those things and to make sure that as I take the next step forward, I'm never forgetting that at least one hand needs to be extended to the next person behind me to help them through the door. And so that's really informed my life, my hopefully leadership approach. And it's just always important to remember where you came from.
That's great. Since we're at the top of the hour, I'll close with one last question. And can you share with us a interesting Bernie Kosar story?
Well, I will say this, and I think you'll be okay with me saying this. I'll tell you the day I met Bernie was the first day I joined the Board of Trustees at the University of Miami. And Bernie was a trustee, and I saw him across the room, and I was like, wow, that's Bernie Kosar. And I was like, I wonder if I'm gonna have the courage to go up to him and introduce myself. And they introduced new trustees, and he was sitting a few tables from me. And the first break that we had, I see Bernie walking toward me, and I thought, I wonder who's behind me. And Bernie was coming straight from me, and he was coming to introduce himself to me. And honestly, I couldn't even believe it. And then he said, well, now we have to take a picture together. I had no idea what was going on. And then he says, let's throw up the U. And he has his Super Bowl ring on. And he says, you wear it. I thought, who is this guy? But that tells you a lot about what I've gotten to know about my friend Bernie, who's just an incredibly humble person and a really kind and welcoming person, and I'm just grateful to know him.
Thank you again for being with us today, and have a wonderful day.
This has been a production of Akron Roundtable, PBS Western Reserve, the University of Akron, and IdeaStream Public Media.